I'm going to demonstrate how you cannot prove the existence of God, and I'll actually be proving how you can disprove the existence of God. God being, as it's most commonly known, as an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, conscious being with a personality that existed before existence itself and is responsible for the creation of everything. And if you go a little bit more niche than that in some religions, that owns you, demands your obedience, and will punish you in hell for eternity if you disobey it. That's some extras, but the primary concern, or the primary use of that word God, is as an omnipotent, omniscient being that is responsible for creation. And the primary points I'm going to be using to rebut that concept are going to be, what would proof actually look like that would demonstrate the existence of God, explaining how the burden of proof is on the one who is making the positive assertion, explaining a bit of metaphysics from objectivism, the primacy of existence point of view. I'll be going over Occam's razor to not multiply things beyond necessity, to keep things simple. I'll be showing a point how even if it was God, it doesn't actually explain anything and doesn't add any value. Also demonstrating how it's a fallacy of composition to attribute characteristics of the parts to the whole in the concept of God, and also how consciousness cannot prevent its own existence. Before we proceed, before you continue watching, I need to ask a question. If I can demonstrate and provide arguments against every point of why you believe God to be true, not even if I can do it, but if you keep on studying and if you can find arguments against every reason you believe is valid to disprove the concept of God, would you change your mind? Because if the answer is no, there's no point of watching the video. There's no point of thinking, what's the point of living if you're just so consumed and fixated on a belief in and having faith, right? I think you need to go see a psychologist, because you've got a severe case of inferiority complex, which is just not true about yourself. You don't need to be humble. You can be proud. You are enough. Like, you can be a healthy, sovereign man or woman. No one's born a sinner. That idea is just absolutely ridiculous. Reality, existence is knowable. If it exists, it is knowable. It might take a long time to learn something, but absolutely everything is learnable. And so that's what I want to show you today. But if you don't care about actually learning the truth, or even forget about the term truth, it's so loaded. If you don't care about looking at another point of view, at another perspective, there's no point in doing anything. If I present all my arguments and someone rebuts me and comes back and says, oh, your argument's wrong here and here and here, fantastic, because I don't care about being wrong, as you shouldn't either. Your sense of self-worth shouldn't come from your ideas. It should come from your character, being able to move towards what's right and not getting bogged down and too afraid and humble to change your mind. Because when you're proud, you have a sense of self-worth that is connected to who you are intimately. It's not, oh, I'm wrong, so therefore, oh, I can't change my mind because that's going to make me look silly, stupid. I can't do that. I can't admit I'm wrong. Right? That's the mindset of being humble, of being humiliated. We don't want that. Oh my goodness, the load behind that one. Let's just stick to God right now, not get into the whole virtues and vices, which humility is a terrible, terrible vice. And pride is a great virtue. In the correct context, of course. All knowledge is contextual. So I'm going to start off with reading a Facebook post I made. It's a series of questions and answers between two people, A and B. It's about the point how consciousness cannot prevent its own existence. The post starts and it says, the universe requires an explanation. And the term universe I'm using in the context to mean existence itself, all of reality as a totality, as a whole. And I get a universe in different contexts, say Marvel or DC, could just be one verse, because uni is meaning one and verse is one, right? Of a particular one, whereas you have a multiverse and an omniverse, but in this categorization I'm using the term universe to mean omniverse, everything. So the universe requires an explanation. Who made it? And I'm going to be putting on the glasses to change the points of view having this conversation. Oh man, that's good as well for the light of my phone here. Nothing made it. No one made it. The universe just is. Surely God made it. Existence can't simply have always been. Who made God then, by that logic? God has always been and just is. So you accept the final answer that something has always existed and just is. Yes, but I say it's a being, God, and you say it's the environment, reality. Where did this God exist before everything existed then? Well, the heavenly realms. So God existed somewhere before he created everything that actually exists. Yes, God's actually, let me correct that, he's actually everything that there is. Everything is him. And replace the word him or he throughout this whole thing with it, she, it doesn't matter, it doesn't change any context. So did he create everything or is everything him? Two different things there. He created everything from himself. What was he before he created everything then? Where was he? How could he have been anything before there was anything? How could he have existed at all before existence? Or he just existed as himself, is a zero-dimensional consciousness field outside of space and time. So what was he conscious of? Because consciousness implies an awareness of something. It's a relationship. Well, he was conscious that he existed. How did God come to exist? Well, he just always was. He's always existed. So God wasn't in control of the fact or directly responsible for his own existence. Is that what you're saying? He just was, he always was, and he had no choice about it in the matter. Is that right? Well, yeah, God is everything. So God is not omnipotent, being all-powerful, as he couldn't prevent himself from existing. No, but he created everything from himself. So if God didn't create himself, and he has always existed against his own will, then the facts of reality must be above him. Well, he could have chosen not to exist, but he chose to exist. That's a good answer, isn't it? How could anyone, even God, choose not to exist before they existed? If God has always been and just is, then reality and the implacable nature of existence supersedes anyone's consciousness and will. Even someone as mighty as God. Well, it doesn't matter how he came to be, he just is. If he exists, and he doesn't, but if he does, it's because it's a requirement of reality itself, not of his own free will choice, which only shows that existence is primary, not consciousness. Existence must come first. If existence demands a consciousness to exist, of God's or anyone else's, there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. The facts of existence are the highest authority, not any conscious mind. If God did exist, he's simply at the mercy of existence itself. Perhaps so, but he made everything else. Where's your proof of this? If we've established that existence exists regardless of what anyone wants and does so of its own accord, why the need for such a plot device like God? There is no need to say that a magical being created everything via magic, because that is, in essence, in effect, exactly what you're saying. A magical being created everything using magic. It doesn't explain anything. The magic, in reality, is that existence exists irrespective of anyone's will. And I use the term magic in that context there, magic. It does not what it wants. It does what it is, as the foundation of all facts. Well, I know God exists because everyone else believes it, which is an argumentum ad populum. Well, because I know it in my heart, which is an argument from emotion. Or because he speaks to me, well, it's an argument from psychosis. How is any of that proof that God created you, or anything? To feel that God created you, to communicate with something, and to not understand what that thing is you're communicating with, and then to call it God, that's not a logical argument. That doesn't prove anything. That's not evidence of a God. If you are hearing voices in your head that are not your own, that's evidence that there are voices in your head which are not your own. To then misappropriately interpret those voices in your head as God is delusional. and probably has something to do with why you're hearing voices in your head that are not your own. Right? It's not saying you're a bad person for that happening. That can happen to anyone. Drugs, technological attack, lots of different reasons, but you can't misinterpret, well, you can misinterpret it, but it's not logical. It doesn't create a logical sounding argument to say, well, I heard God's voice. I feel it in my heart. I read it in the Bible. It doesn't prove anything. It's invalid evidence. If it was to go to a proper court, it's dismissed. This isn't evidence. It's like you put someone on, and I'm deviating from the script a little bit here. I'll get back to it and finish it off in a minute. It's like if you're accused of murder, you go up to court and you're like, well, I have this piece of paper which proves I didn't murder her. And the judge reads it. It's like, the defendant has written that he is not a murderer because he is not a murderer. He wrote it on a piece of paper. This is my evidence. This is the truth. And it says it's the truth. Well, that's the same thing with the Bible. This piece of paper that I wrote says God is real and it is the truth. No, it's just words on paper that don't imply any logical, rational argument. It's all just fallacy after fallacy. And just people's, not even people's testimonies. It's just stories, literal stories. But that's just the Christian or any of the primary religions versions of God. You know, there's many different interpretations of God. I probably should have opened with that too. I'll continue with it right now because every man and his bloody dog, every single person you ask will have a different interpretation of what God is, but ultimately what it comes back to is the highest authority that is responsible for the creation of the universe, of everything as a totality, is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipotent. And if you believe in God, you should know what those three words mean. But I'll just say it again, explain it in case you don't, because a lot of people believe what they believe without any understanding whatsoever. Omnipotent, meaning all-powerful, can do literally anything. There is nothing that he cannot do. Wait, hold on. So can your God create a rock that's so heavy you can't lift? Oh, paradox. Oh, something that God cannot do. Is your God able to imagine something that is unimaginable? Oh, something he can't do. Can your God prevent himself from existing before he existed? Oh, can't do it. He's always existed. Oh, well, he's not responsible for his own existence, therefore not omnipotent. Nothing is omnipotent. The concept is invalid. It's just an imagination. It's detached from actual reality. So omnipotent, omniscient, meaning knowing everything, knowing all that there is to know. How can you know the future? We all have free will. To say that you can be omniscient is to deny free will and say, oh, everything's determined, everything's already happened. Oh, all time is currently in the present. Oh, we just understand time differently in this world. Nonsense. Bullshit. Where is the proof for that? Where is any shred of logical, sound argument to validate that preposterous, out-of-this-world claim? It is nonsensical. No, you cannot be omniscient. You could know a lot, and the most powerful person in existence, whatever that kind of being is, head of the cabal, whoever it is, will be the most intelligent and the most knowledgeable, therefore they have the most power, and probably the worst moral code as well, that could be up for debate, a lot of debate. And they're not God. No one's God. You can't be God. It can't even be gods, right? You can be extremely powerful, extremely intelligent, extremely knowledgeable, but you can't be omnipotent. You can't be omniscient. You can't know everything. By what means do you know everything? Oh, I just know. Ridiculous. No. Even if you did magically have an ability to just know, you can't just know everything. It's preposterous. And primarily because you can't know the future. The future isn't set. It's not created. It's that which hasn't happened yet. If you don't understand time, well, stop watching the video because there's nothing I can do to help. All right, continuing back onto this. Oh, and omnipresent just means everywhere, is everywhere all at once. So that would mean the concept of God is the ultimate pervert. There is nothing which could become, has a higher degree on perverseness that watches you. I don't even need to go into the specific details because it's perverse. That's, you do your dirty and naughty things by yourself. The idea that there is an omniscient, alien, extra-dimensional creator God constantly watching you when you're on the dunny is just sick. It's disgusting. And constantly watching when kids are raped and people are being murdered and just says, ha ha ha, I'm not doing anything because of free will. It's like, really? Just going to repeat that last thing that character A here said. I know God exists because everyone believes it. It's in the Bible. I know it in my heart. He speaks to me, etc. Right? How is any of this proof that a God created you or anything? It's not proof. It's not even evidence. The fact existence exists is proof that God does not, because existence exists. Because even if it did exist, it can only be because it had to as a fact of existence. And if a fact of existence is superior to God, then that thing is not God by definition. If facts are above God, then what is the use of a God? I just need to feel loved and cared for, okay? I need to feel that I'm part of a bigger purpose, that I'm part of something, and I'm scared, and I don't know, and I'm confused. It's like, okay, man, I get it. I've been there. I've fallen into that hideous, monstrous, self-defecating, demeaning, lots of other words that have negative connotations to them. I've been in that trap, and it's horrible. I get it, right? Love and care for yourself. You are enough. Not just as you are, but in capability, in potential. You have the power to be happy, to know reality. Obviously not to a level of omniscience, that's ridiculous, but to know it. If something exists, it is knowable. Only that which does not exist is mysterious and works in mysterious ways because it doesn't exist. That which exists leaves clues. If it's real, it leaves clues. It has to. It has to. Because it's real, it exists. Of course there's clues. Of course it's real. If it's real, it leaves clues. There is evidence. Evidence of it. And finally, yeah, work on yourself in the realm of reality and stop imagining fantasies that serve no practical purpose. I got to take off the glasses now. It was nice. It was protecting me from the light. You know, could have shine up the face. All right, so that little part's done. I hope you enjoyed that. And that's just showing through logic that you can't have a consciousness prevent its own existence. And if it can't, well, then it's not God. It's not God. What happens is people misinterpret existence or the laws of nature, non-thinking, unconscious, well, it's not even unconscious, but just not conscious, not even entities, but facts. Because what is the law of identity, which states that everything is as it is and is not what it's not. A is A, the law of non-contradiction. It's not an entity. So that's just a fact of reality. It's a law. People confuse existence and reality being one big whole thing, which in a way it is, but it's made up of lots of different parts. Just like my body is made up of lots of different cells, but it's one part. Well, it's both. And they confuse the whole and they anthropomorphize it. They project human-like qualities and characteristics onto existence and nature, because that's just what people of the past did, the ancients. They didn't understand scientifically what thunder was, what rain was, the tides, the oceans, what happened after people died, all sorts of things. So they said, Hades of the underworld, god of the underworld in the Greek mythology. And then Zeus, he's the king and the god of thunder and lightning. Poseidon, the god of the seas and the tides, the oceans. Why do they do this? Because they're seeking to understand reality and they're putting some kind of animation or animism. Animism? Let me look that up. Animism. Is it animism? Animism? Oh, it is animism. I'll keep that in here. Yeah, it's animism. Animism is the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. Animism perceives all things as conscious and whatnot. It's like, no, you are conscious. Only that which has a mind and a body of sorts, is conscious. A rock is not conscious. Like, if you believe a rock is conscious, imagine how awful that would be. Imagine your consciousness in a rock. I mean, a lot of people, you can relate them to the consciousness of rocks. My goodness, the way people act, but they're not actual rocks. That would be a terrible existence. Consciousness exists in minds. And people misinterpret intelligent things where they don't understand what intelligence is, and they're unable to differentiate complex and sophisticated systems that have goal-directed action, like trees and plants, or even the human body or AI, and then they animize it. Oh my goodness. Is that the right word? Animize it? Animize. Oh, should I do a little check? Maybe I'll cut this part out. Yes, it is. I've never used that word in my life before. Animize, to give lifelike qualities to something that does not have life. Well, that just simulates life. Well, actually, no, life is different to consciousness, because a plant and a tree can have life but not be conscious. And thank goodness it isn't conscious. That wouldn't be a fun experience. I know I definitely would not want to experience that. Because responding to stimuli is very different to being conscious, right? When you get a little hammer and you tap your knee, you're not consciously kicking your knee. Your body is responding to stimuli. People have these experiments about plants, and I've seen a lot of them, and they're really cool, where what you say to the plants can affect it, the different frequencies. You burn shrimps and different, or maybe people who haven't seen that. So they put a plant in a room and then they burnt shrimps, like threw shrimps into boiling water into a room next door, and the plant responded. Just because it's responding doesn't mean that it's conscious. Just like, you know, when you whack your funny bone or you touch a certain place and your hand moves, you're not consciously doing it. It's just a causal mechanistic action, cause and effect that's happening there. Because intelligence requires free will, it requires choice, it requires the ability to be stupid, to do the wrong thing. It requires unintelligence to be intelligent. Funny way of putting it. That's a little bit off topic. If you want to learn more about intelligence, I made a video directly about intelligence, a couple hours long. I go into quite a lot of depth. So the next point I'm going to get into is the burden of proof. If you claim that God exists, or anything, it is up to you to prove it. If you claim you have authority over me or someone else, it is up to you to prove it. The burden of proof is on the one who makes the positive claim. If I say I can bench press 600 kilos, it's up to me to prove it to you that I can. It's not up to you to disprove that I can't. If you were to tell me you can squat 1,400 kilos, and I'm like, no, you can't, prove it. And you say, well, you can't disprove I can't squat 1,600 kilos. That's ridiculous. That's nonsense. Bah, get out of here, you bloody fool. When it comes to God, you can't disprove that God doesn't exist. This is an arbitrary assertion. It's nonsensical. It's a meaningless, vacuous statement. Because you can't prove something by saying that you can't disprove it. That's actually a logical fallacy called argumentatum ad ignorantium, or ignorantium. Depends. I think you can say it both ways, with the D and the T. Ignorantium. It's saying, it's basically the appeal to ignorance, saying because you can't disprove it, therefore you can't prove it. Oh, nobody knows. You don't actually know, so therefore it's true, right? It's also in a way saying you must be omniscient before you can know anything. And because you're not omniscient, you can't disprove it, therefore God does actually exist. It's a rocket ship in the wrong direction, away from logic. Here's another example. If I was to ask you to disprove the gremlins in your shoes, I said, there's gremlins living in your shoes right now. And you go, well, no, there's not. And I say, well, you can't prove that there's not. And you take off your shoe and you show me, look, there's no gremlins in here. And I say, well, they're really small. Like they're tiny, you can't see them. You're like, oh, well, I'll go get a microscope and I'll go see them. Oh, no, they're too small. Even for electron microscopes, they're really small. Or I say they're invisible. Or I say they're really shy and they ran out of your shoes when you went to look for them. And as soon as you start to look for the gremlins, you won't see them. But when you're not looking, they'll go back into your shoes. No matter what you do, you can't disprove that because it's an arbitrary claim. I can just keep on saying stupid shit that is out of this world insane, and you can't disprove it, no matter what you do. Look, I'm looking at it from all these different spectrums. I've got X-ray, I've got gamma vision, and I can't see any gremlins. It goes down to the Planck length, the smallest theoretical length, and I could just say, oh, well, they've just temporarily departed into an alternate reality, which none of your instruments can see, because you're attempting to observe them. The moment you stop observing them, they will go back into your shoes. Prove that they're not. Prove that this is not happening, right? So it's ridiculous. You can't claim something as true just because you can't disprove it. You can only prove something as true by proving it's true, having evidence and an argument to back it up. Otherwise, it's just silly talk. Total silly. Because we need to understand that reality, existence itself, is the ultimate arbiter in disputes. It is the court of final appeal, as Ayn Rand called it, which I really like. It's like, if I have this coconut oil in this jar, prove to me it dropped. Well, that's quite easy. You can prove it dropped because you saw it, you witnessed it, you perceived it with your eyes, right? Your vision perceived it, you sensed it. That is the way we can prove anything. And when we say, well, how do we know it actually dropped, right? And that's when you get into metaphysics and you get into axioms, the three axioms of metaphysics. I'll round this up in a second. The primacy of existence, then you have identity and consciousness, these three axioms. Well, what is there? Or is there anything? Yes, there's existence. What is it? Well, the law of identity, A is A is not B. And consciousness, well, we're aware of it. So these are primary axioms, and they cannot be proved. It's like, well, we can prove this happened because we can do it. But like, how do you prove existence exists? Existence exists, and axioms, law of identity, are beyond proof. You don't need to prove them. You can't prove them because they're the basis for proof. Reality existence is what you measure and compare everything to that you try to prove. We only prove that this dropped because we witnessed it. It happened in reality, in existence. You don't prove existence to be real. The fact that you are conscious of being and existing is all the proof that, well, it's a validation that the axiom is correct and you haven't made an error in your cognition. It's beyond proof. And I get it, that does take a little while to wrap your head around. Well, you're like, well, didn't you just prove it? Well, don't worry, it's just an axiomatic concept. Existence exists, you are aware of it, things are what they are, because how can this be 100% a coconut jar with coconut oil in it and be a prehistoric pterodactyl at the same time in the same respect? It can't be. It is what it is. It's not a dog, it's not a watermelon, it's not a coconut, it's not a mirror, sunglasses, it is what it is. It can't be raining right here, right now, and not raining right here and right now, in the same respect, in the same time. It just doesn't work. The law of identity, A is not B, which is really useful to know. The more you live and come across different fallacies and unsound arguments in your daily life, the more you realize the validity of the law of identity. It's really useful, because it took me a while to understand the practical implications of how useful the law of identity actually is. So I want to touch on now the next point. If God was to exist, what would proof look like? What would actually be proof of God's existence? And then the opposite, what would proof of God's non-existence look like? So what would actually prove God exists? How would God prove it is God to you? Say, for instance, God came down to earth and as Jesus, or as just any man, right? And suddenly was doing miraculous things like levitating coconut jars or throwing cars around or lifting up mountains and moving it. How could you not know? Or how could you determine if it was God or just some alien that had advanced technology, like a magician who was using technology or magic tricks to deceive your senses and show you, creating optical illusions, like even in Spider-Man, where there's all those drones flying around and that they have a screen on them and they're projecting like a dragon or some kind of creature, a monster, and it's like smashing through cities in Europe, but it's actually just a whole bunch of drones shooting shit. How do you know your senses aren't being deceived? Like, well, that is a valid question as well. How do you know your senses aren't being deceived in that context? But how do you know that it's actually God that's doing that? What if someone comes communicating to you, you hear voices in your head? How do you know it's God? Oh, because it told me it's a God. So what? So fucking what? That doesn't count for anything, right? Do you think any bad dude who had the voice of God, which is apparently a technology which can just send sound waves into your brain space, which is vibrating on a particular frequency, and it can match that and implant voices in your head, you think some bad dude, whether they're low down in the fucking hierarchy of the Kabbalah or right up the top, do you think they're going to tell you the truth? Oh, it's actually me. I'm from the Vatican, or I'm from the police, or some other corrupt organization, and I'm actually trying to trick you, do this. They're obviously not going to say that. Like, I'm God, or I'm some alien creature, or whatever they're going to say. As if God would actually do that. And if God did do that, how can you be sure it's God? Oh, because it said it's God, and I felt it to be true. That's not good enough answers. How many times have we heard, it's horrible to bring up, but serial killers and rapists and all the stories of women meeting psychopaths, how many times do they say, I thought he was a good guy, I trusted him? You've probably experienced this with people you've met yourself. You're like, I thought they were good. It felt right to be with them. It could even be a partner. But then it turns out, oh man, they're a horrible bitch. or a psychopathic do. No, they're terrible. Feelings are not a method of cognition. It's just the way you feel about something. It might be wrong, it might be right? But it's not a method of cognition. It's not a logical argument. Can't say, well, this voice in my head communicated with me. It said it was God. It felt like it was God. Well, that's not good enough. It's not just it was your neighbor or your friend communicating with you. This is a totally different thing. This is talking about God, a entity that is omnipotent, omniscient, and responsible for the creation of the universe. It's not just saying, was your friend telepathically communicating to you? And you're like, well, it did sound like them. That say stuff that only they would know, and it felt like them. They were telepathically communicating to me, or they came and visited me in a lucid dream or astral projection. That's totally different and plausible. That's possible. Like, oh, I'm pretty sure it was them. But even then, still, you could be deceived. You could be deceived. It could be some kind of entity wearing a shape-shifting suit. It could be a reptilian. It could be an AI archon. It could be all these different things. It's hard to know, especially when you're getting out of our everyday waking consciousness and you're getting into these different dimensions. Well, there's still so much we don't know because we're not omniscient. We can know a lot, but it takes a lot of time to learn all these things. Look how long it's taken humanity to get to this point. There's obviously still a lot wrong with humanity, but we have laptops and we've got great philosophies, we've got lights on cameras, and we've got all this cool stuff, but it didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. Could things be better? Obviously, of course. Could they be worse? Yes, of course, but that's besides the point. Coming back. Another great example. If this God came in reverse time or did any kind of magic, any kind of magic shit, how do you not know it's Rick Sanchez if you've seen Rick and Morty? Like Rick in that TV show, if you're not familiar with Rick and Morty, it's an animated like cartoon. You probably like it. If you're watching this kind of video, you probably like that because he's essentially God. Well, not essentially, but he's very technologically advanced. He's a genius scientist and he can make all this cool stuff. Make a portal gun and travel to different dimensions, and whatever problem there is, he can always create a solution. How do you know it's not just Rick or someone like Rick just pretending to be God, right? Why would your automatic conclusion go, it must be the real thing? Wouldn't you be a little bit suspicious? It's like, if it was true, that's the most important, most powerful position in all of reality, which don't you think every evil motherfucker, especially if you believe in that religious bullshit, the devil or whatever equivalent in any of the other religions, would be attempting to impose as an imposter? Don't you think it's very suspicious if this God is communicating to you? Why would your first assumption be, just because it says it's God and it felt like it was, that it actually is, right? Every evil bastard and his evil dog is going to be pretending to be that position because that is the highest position that there theoretically is, even outside of actuality. Well, if it was actual and theoretical, that's the highest position in all of existence. Of course, everyone's fighting for that position to be God, right? Because they want that. Because that's where all the power is, and power gets you what you want. You can be in control, you can live the way you want, you can get what you want. Whether it's just to take money, or if it's to have sex with whoever you want, or just to feel like a boss and kill and control whoever you want, or if it's getting into different astral dimensions, it's because they're feeding on people, whatever. That is the most vied after position in all of existence, that theoretical concept of God. Don't you think you should be a little bit suspicious just before believing any random claim that this is God? So again, how could you possibly prove it? How could you possibly prove it? I think if it did exist, the only way it could prove it was if it made you it. If you became God and you could create a world and like fully experience it while being cognizant of the fact that you had came from just being a man or a woman, and you could create everything, you could destroy everything at a click of the thumbs and actually know it and do it. Because how else would you actually verify that for a fact that you had met God, if not doing something like that? Because everything else can be manipulated and you could be deceived. An imposter could be pushing a narrative to simulate God. Duh. It's pretty obvious if you think of it through the lens and perspective of an evil genius. That's what they're going to do. Because people fall for it. Time and time again, billions of people fall for it. Because they're searching for answers and they don't want to look for the answers. They just want what's given to them so they can make them feel okay. Not great, but just okay. Which is, I think, sad. And essentially, people call things that they don't understand God. That's it. Whoa, it's the thunder and lightning in the sky. Let's call it Zeus, it's God. Oh, there's a tidal wave, an earthquake, a volcano. Let's call it God, because we don't understand what it is. Magic, Harry Potter, Voldemort, Jesus, God, Zeus, Hades. We don't know what it is. Let's call it God. It's a piss poor attempt at understanding reality. I'd like to give another example of how the existence of God doesn't actually explain anything. All of reality is someone else's imagination, from you to the trees to truth and fiction to good and bad. None of it is real. This is what people who believe in God actually believe. None of it's real. It's just the only thing that's real is this alien hyperdimensional creature which is imagining us to be real, which has created us imagining us. How does this alien do it? Magic. How does it exist? Magic. How did this alien exist before anything else existed? Magic. It doesn't explain anything. So let's move on to the primacy of existence. The primacy of existence is talking and explaining that existence must exist before a consciousness can be aware that something exists. A consciousness aware of nothing is a contradiction. A consciousness must be aware of something. That is what awareness is. That is what consciousness is. It's awareness of something. If there is nothing to be aware of, there can be no consciousness. If there is nothing to see, you can't see anything. You only see when you are seeing something. Like this is, you could say I'm seeing black or darkness, but it's not actually anything. Imagine just having no eyes or being blind. Ooh, not a pretty thing. Imagine to just see nothing at all. It's like hearing is, you only hear something when there's something to hear. And all these things are not what you are. They're not what someone is. You're not vision. You're not hearing. You're not smell. You're not touch. You're not consciousness. It's all just faculties of what you are, of a being, of an intelligent being, a spiritual life. You can get into different definitions of what you actually are, but you're definitely not consciousness. That's just the way you are aware of your own existence. And it can be used in different contexts as well, like your level of consciousness, how aware of your internal workings and the external facts of reality. But consciousness itself is a faculty of perceiving that which exists, of being aware of the existence of something. How can I be conscious of this coconut jar if the coconut jar wasn't here? If it was gone, I'm aware of the coconut jar. No, you're not, because it's not there. Or how am I aware of the pumpkin that's not here? I'm not aware of it. I can imagine it in my mind, but that's different to being conscious of a pumpkin that doesn't exist. How can you have consciousness before there is existence? When we're trying to, we have to conceptualize here and imagine there as total nothingness, just a consciousness. Where is this consciousness? There has to be somewhere for it to exist. People experience the void. You can look up near-death experiences of the void, and they say they experience a state where there is no vision, no hearing, but they're still conscious. So they're obviously somewhere. It's just a totally different somewhere to the somewhere we're existing right now. It sounds like it's similar to when you go into a meditative trance or a state and you're just focusing on your awareness of just being. That is obviously still somewhere, and you are still obviously conscious of something. You could say a state of peace or of yourself at that point. But you have to be a self somewhere. You have to exist before you're conscious. So consciousness is a relationship, and existence must come before. It is the prerequisite of consciousness. Existence can exist without the necessity of consciousness. All this quantum physics bullshit is just nonsense, and you can prove it wrong. They say, oh, reality only works when you're observing it. Do a little experiment for yourself and test this out. Go get a candle, light it, put it in a room, walk away, come back an hour later. Has the candle burnt down? Yes. Oh, well, obviously, reality works when you're not watching it, because reality is reality. It exists regardless, irrespective, independent of your consciousness. That's what objective reality is, independent of consciousness. Us in reality are just living in reality, almost visitors in a way. Oh, that's a funny way to put it. And we're observing and interacting and living our lives inside of reality, an unthinking, maybe you could call it an entity, the whole thing. You can imagine existence as a whole, and I'm not just talking about this world, all possible worlds, even in Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, World of Warcraft, Dawn of War, or computer games, all possible worlds, right? You could view existence itself as the box. Imagine a big box. And that's what I'm saying is existence as a totality, even though that is a redundant way to state existence, because existence obviously means that which exists. This exists, the pair of sunglasses which don't exist. So obviously that isn't in the classification, existence. Right? Existence implies, by definition, everything that which exists. Just because we can't perceive something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I can't perceive 4G or X-rays, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We've got technology that can perceive that, and there's going to be other dimensions that exist that we don't have the technology available to us right now that exists as well. So that's what I mean. The box is existence. Existence as a totality or as a whole is redundant. I think you could also call that verbosity or tautology to be a little bit fancy. It's like, I'm absolutely certain. When you say absolutely certain, it's like, I'm certain. Like, the gremlins are small, they're tiny small. You're saying the same word twice. I think this is a little interesting tidbit to share. So, existence, reality, and reality does get used interchangeably. People use reality to describe this world, and then they can also say realities. So I think a more accurate term for that is dimensions or planes of existence or realms. Reality typically means reality as a whole. It means all that exists. This world, if there's other worlds, astral dimension, whatever other worlds, a void, wherever, that's what we're talking about here. So existence exists. Consciousness has to exist in existence, and let's call that box, all of existence. And with the primacy of existence, it states and explains that reality just is. And that is very confusing in the beginning. It's very difficult to understand. It actually took me a couple bloody years. Oh, I'm a slow learner. I'm just dedicated. I'm dedicated to the truth. So I keep going relentlessly. But yeah, when you get it, it's like, it's actually really quite simple. Because ultimately, the answer always is, for everything, it just is. Like, why are these glasses shaped like this? Oh no, why do they feel like this? Oh, because of the aluminium and the plastic in it. That's why they are like that. Okay, why are they like that? Oh, because the atoms in it and the subatomic particles and this and that and the frequency of this makes it like that. Okay, why? You could ask it about this. The coconut jar. Oh, this is the mascot of the show, the lesson today, the coconut jar. Love this. You can use this for so much stuff. It's so good. Ultimately, your answer will always be, it just is. It's like that. I don't know why, it just is. You could ask why 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Ultimately, your answer for absolutely everything is just is. Even if you believe in God. Say, well, how God's there? He just is. God's always been, it just is, right? And then you get into Occam's razor. Don't multiply things beyond necessity. Don't make something simple complex. Don't look for more complex answers as a substitute for the simplest answer. Existence exists. You don't then need to go to a middleman. Say, well, how does existence exist? It can't exist by itself, therefore it needs another someone to create it. But people say, oh, there needs to be a creator. It's like, well, so you're accepting the fact that there must have always been something, but for whatever reason, you feel more comfortable when it's a conscious being, rather than just existence as an unthinking nature. Not even Mother Nature, because that's getting too personalized and anthropomorphized and feminine, right? Too polarized. It's too narrow, right? Just nature. Nature itself. Call that existence. Just everything that there is. The simplest answer, because that is the simplest answer. Just reality, existence, just is, and always has been. So then add that middleman is to make it more complicated. You say, well, no, that can't be the answer. Let's make it more complex, more complicated, and add another feature to it and say that's the truth. Just looking at Occam's razor, it kind of nulls and voids it. It's not proof in a totality that it null and voids the concept of God like the other proofs I've given, but it just raises that big question. It's like if you have a kid and they're standing next to an empty cookie jar and they've got crumbs all over their face, and you say, darling, did you eat all the cookies from the cookie jar? And they say, no, Daddy, it was a gremlin unicorn. He ran in, ate the cookies, and ran away, and I tried to stop him, but I didn't get any, he ate them. Are you going to go, oh yeah, that sounds valid? Or he blames it on his sister to bring it down to more reality, right? Not make it so fantastical. He blames his sister. Oh no, Emma, she ate it. Someone else did it, wasn't me. It's like you got crumbs all over your face, kid. I don't trust you. I don't believe that. The simplest answer is the answer. He ate the cookies. The little kid did, the little boy in this case. It wasn't his sister, it wasn't the unicorn gremlin. Don't complicate it beyond necessity. Don't multiply things beyond necessity. The simplest answer most often, not always, but most often is the truth. So that's not a proof in my argument against God, but it has a lot of weight behind it. Because why? Why complicate it when it doesn't need to be complicated? Make it simple because it is simple. Reality just is, and it has always been. Where would the universe have come from? Because people say, oh, if you're against God, you must be for the Big Bang. If you don't believe in God's morality, you're a Satanist. And this is just a false dichotomy. It's a logical fallacy. It's a logical fallacy of the false dichotomy or the false alternative. Saying, if you're not this, you must be this. No. The Big Bang is nonsense too. It says there was absolutely nothing happened, and then there was an explosion where everything came out of nothing, and then there was everything. What? That doesn't make sense. That's illogical. That can't happen. I don't believe that. I don't care how many scientists and use whatever crazy methods to try and argue fantasy and fiction into reality. Doesn't work. Look at it from a philosophic standpoint. The law of identity, existence exists and must have always been. We have veto power. That's why I love philosophy. You have veto power over physics. You go, that is out. Quantum physics, bullshit. No, that's a violation of the law of identity. Consciousness is not primary. Existence is primary. No, that's wrong. Just because you study philosophy doesn't mean you know everything. Absolutely not, of course. But we can know what is wrong. We can know for a fact what is wrong. Quantum physics, bullshit. Big Bang Theory, bullshit. It's a nice attempt to try and explain the universe, but its premise is ultimately flawed. Then next, what else do you have? Well, simulation theory. People go, well, the world must have been created. It's a simulation. And then, okay, let's pretend it is. The world is a simulation. Where did it come from? Well, someone created the simulation. Okay, well, where is that someone? Who is that someone? Well, they're in the real world. Okay, well, how did that real world get there? Well, it's also not the real world, it's a simulation and someone else created it. Ad infinitum, infinite regression, just going back and back and back. It's the same thing with God. We look at reality and everything seems to be intelligently designed. What's that, the teleological or the ontological argument? I can't remember. Oh, everything appears to have intelligent design. Let's just forget about causality and the law of identity, things being what they are, and the idea that just because something looks intelligently designed, it must be God, must be that magical being that exists in the magical world and does magic. Like, that's just an irrelevant conclusion. It's not connected. There's no logical basis to go, whoa, everything's intelligently designed. God, magic did it. It's like, at least go, well, some intelligent alien did it, some other entity that has more power and knowledge than us. Like, obviously it's not God, but maybe something else designed it, or maybe it's not designed and it just is what it is and it's always been that way. Which, I get it, it's very tricky to understand. And so I want to try and repeat a lot of the things that I've heard which made it finally click for me, because here's one. Where did the universe come from? It's the wrong question. It's like, it's begging the question. Petitio principi is a Latin term for that. Oh, I remember. Go me. It's assuming the conclusion in the question. You're saying, where did the universe come from? It's like, well, you're assuming that there is somewhere for the universe to come from. Universe being the box, reality, the omniverse, everything. Where would it come from? Where would that, all of existence, come from? It can't come from non-existence. That's out. There is nowhere outside the universe. There is no time before the universe. There's nothing exists where everything isn't. I like that one too. Reality is the place where everything isn't is. Another funny way to put it. Everything that exists is inside the universe. There is no outside the universe. There is no outside existence. The box is just the box. And I know when you think about the box and you try to visualize all of existence inside a box, in your mind, you're looking at it from outside the box. In reality, you can't do that. You're always inside the box. There is no getting outside the box to view it from outside the box. Because the box, in this context, represents everything. How are you meant to get outside of everything to view everything? You can't. It doesn't work like that. You're in the box. There's no escaping the box. It's a good box. It's a pretty big box. As long as you're in a big box, you want to be in a big box. And existence does seem to be a pretty big box. If I had to walk around, even this world is pretty big. That's why I like to get planes and buses, because walking around sucks, because it's a big place. It's a big world, big box. Oh, that could be taken in wrong ways. Continuing on. The universe can't come from anywhere. Well, but how has it always been? Well, how could it not have always been? Because if you say it needed a beginning, and I get it, this is really tricky because we look at everything in existence, we say, well, this hasn't always existed, this hasn't always existed, it had a start point, and it's going to finish, decompose, entropy is going to get it one day, right? But then that's when we commit the fallacy of composition, where we attribute characteristics of parts, because this is part of the universe, part of existence, these nail clippers are everything in existence is just a part of reality, of all that there is. And we attribute the characteristics of the parts to the whole. And we say, well, but again, that's a logical fallacy. You can't do that in this context. You can't say, well, everything in reality has a beginning and an end, so therefore the universe as a whole must have a beginning and an end. It's like, I'll give you another example of the fallacy of composition. We all have mothers and fathers. Every human being that's alive has a mum and dad, right? So therefore, if I was to commit a logical fallacy of composition, I'd say, well, therefore, the human race as a collective has a mother and father. I mean, mystical religious zealot nuts often do say that, right? But when we look at it from a logical point of view, well, there's no collective mother and father of humankind. It's just every individual has their own mother and father. Another composition fallacy. When we look at a football team and look at each individual player, and each player may be the best there is in whatever positions, I don't know sports. But then if you put them together as a team, they may not necessarily be the best team because their egos conflict or they don't work well together, whatever it is. Just because the parts are a particular way and have particular characteristics does not mean you can automatically attribute those characteristics to the totality, to the whole, and say, because all these football players are individually the best, therefore the team will be the best. Not necessarily. It doesn't always work like that. A lot of the time it doesn't. I have a mum and dad, you do. The human race doesn't. When we look at everything in existence, everything seems to have a beginning and an end, but when you look at the universe as a whole, well, that can't have a beginning. Can't have a beginning. It just always must have been. But then, this is a little part I'm still stuck with. Does that mean it goes back infinitely? How does that work? And oh, my goodness, okay, that's confusing. I'm still stumped on that, though I will figure that out one day. You just gotta keep thinking about this stuff and keep listening to other people and explain it and figure it out. Because, oh, that's a crazy thing to think about. But what else is the answer? What could be another answer? Even if you were to accept God, well, God must go back infinitely. So you're still accepting the same premise. No matter what you accept, the simulation theory or aliens, whatever, you're still accepting it must have gone back all the way. Unless you're accepting Big Bang and there was just nothing and then something, which is a bigger logical detachment from reality. Just, well, that doesn't work at all. Like, at least the idea of going back infinite in time, like that could be possible. It's just I don't understand it yet. Whereas just something from nothing, well, in individual parts, sure, but not in the totality of existence. It can't work there. For instance, where something from nothing can work in the parts of existence, You go to sleep and then you start dreaming, boom, the dream was manifest out of nothing. But then again, it wasn't nothing. It came from your brain and your mind, which was already pre-existing. Or you create World of Warcraft, oh, it came from nothing. Well, not really. It came from this world and the mind of the programmer who developed it. Lord of the Rings on a book, it came from nothing. Well, no, it didn't. Nothing is actually coming, oh, yeah, nothing is actually coming from nothing. Right? Something is always coming from a place that existed prior to it. And so existence has to have always existed. It just is. Like, when did it begin? It never began. It just always is. And another way to think about this that I thought of that really actually helped me, 2 + 2 = 4. That's just a fact, right? Forget about all the symbols we're using and that it's in the English language. Just 2 + 2 = 4. Or another one, a circle is not a square. You can't have a square circle. You can't have a square circle. Or just think of any other fact that must be true no matter what dimension you're in. If you're bloody tripping on DMT and you're meeting the machine elves, or you're hallucinating that you're a bloody a patch on the carpet or something, or whatever, you're tripping on mushrooms and any crazy stuff, those facts remain the same. You're still not going to see a square circle. You may see some wacky, crazy things and experience things that are totally different to this reality, but you're not going to see a square circle. And 2 + 2 isn't going to suddenly equal 5. And something that is true, just true and false aren't going to reverse or insert any other actual fact. Let's just look at 2 + 2 = 4. When did that become true? It doesn't have a beginning. It doesn't matter if there was no consciousness, no humans ever in all of reality. That's just been a fact forever. And you can't destroy that fact, no matter what you do, no matter how much poison you inject into people, how much bloody shit you spray in the skies, how much crap you put into the water. It's not going to change the fact 2 + 2 = 4. That didn't begin. That exists outside of time. That's eternal, outside of time. Doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. So when I thought of that example, oh, I really got it for the universe. Oh, okay, the universe must be existing outside of time in a way I don't fully grasp right now, but I can get it with that example of the 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, well, okay, so reality must have existed as forever, right, and can continue to go on forever. That is a lot about the primacy of existence, and if you want to study that properly, I will actually put 3 links in the description below this, I think 3, from Leonard Peikoff explaining metaphysics. So metaphysics, the first rung in, or the foundation of the philosophy of objectivism, metaphysics being the study of everything as a whole. And he'll go through in lots of detail and giving lots of different explanations where I learned a lot of this from. And that will definitely help you if you are interested in the most important question of everything. Because this topic is the most fundamental, the most important topic there is. Because everything, absolutely everything, without a shadow of a doubt, inescapably, indubitably, inevitably, comes and rests upon this topic of existence exists. And, well, who created the universe, or how did it get here, all that kind of stuff. That is the foundation, the primacy of existence, metaphysics. The most important thing. That's why I'm so fascinated by it. And that's why I'll keep studying it to learn it even better than I do now. Much better than I do now. In the coming years, I'm going to look back and go, oh, you had it pretty good. But, you know, I'm going to understand it even further. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the video now. I was going to include the psychological effects and detriments of believing in God, but I think I'll save that for another video, because it has tremendous, awful, self-destructive and societal, world-destructive, destroying properties of believing the ultimate fantasy, the ultimate nonsensical plot device invented by evil bastards to control the world and perhaps worlds beyond it. But I'll save that for another video, because I have a lot of things written down here, and it might kind of taint the color a little bit of this presentation. So I'll save that for another time. So in the beginning, I told you what I was going to tell you, the main points. I told you, and now I'm going to tell you what I told you. So we went over what would proof actually be? What would proof look like if God really did exist? And you may have an argument and say, oh, no, and disagree with me. If you do, share it, that's fine. And I said, the burden of proof is on the one who bears the claim. If you are claiming God exists, the positive, right? Because you might say, well, you're claiming that God doesn't exist, right? I'm rebutting the claim that God exists. You're asserting the positive, that something is true and is real. Whoever is doing that needs to back it up with actual proof. Actual proof. The Bible says so, that's not proof. That's a piece of evidence, but it's like the murderer writing on a piece of paper, I didn't murder him, and saying, well, I have this, it's evidence, Judge. Is this admissible as evidence in the court? No. Even our corrupt courts of today would just say, no, that's not, that's stupid. It's the same thing with the Bible. The Bible says so. No, get out here. Go back to the drawing board. Start to think. Stop just falling for the logical fallacy of repetition. I'm just repeating what I heard, right? And it's okay to repeat things that you hear as long as you've put it through the filter of your own reason and you've vetted it with your understanding. So burden of proof went over the primacy of existence, though there is a lot to that, and really it's just as simple as existence exists. It just is. It has to have just been always what it is, because how can it not? Existence can only ever always exist as existence. Non-existence does not exist and can never exist because it's non-existence. Only that which can exist can ever exist. And that kind of does sound a bit repetitive, but how else do you explain it? It just is. It's not a cop-out. It's not saying I don't know. It's an explanation which takes a while to actually get it. And you go, oh, it just is. Okay. There's still a fucking shit ton of other questions to ask about that. Like all the things above the just is, like, yeah, sure, this bottle just is, but how is it made? What are the actual properties? If I wanted to make one, what materials, minerals, I don't know, do you need minerals to make a plastic bottle? What actually is plastic? It's some kind of oil refining, isn't it? Oh, there's a lot to learn there, right? Just because I know it is doesn't mean I know what it is. That's a law of identity now. Oh, that's why I have all the other sciences, biology and chemistry and physics, etc. So I told you about primacy of existence. I told you about Occam's razor to keep things simple. Most often, it's like with a murder case. It's like we have video footage of you, Mr. Whoever, standing over the victim with a gun, fingerprints, eyewitness footage and all this stuff, right? And then the defendant says, well, that was actually someone who was impersonating me. I was over in this different country and they've set me up. Though actually that can happen in some cases. So just try and, what's the fucking word? Create an extension of this and elaborate and make it even more fanciful than that. Just like, what's the simple answer? We got like overwhelming evidence this is the truth, but actually, no, it's not. It's this other thing. So Occam's razor, keep things simple. Even if God did exist as an explanation, it essentially just boils down to a magical being did it with magic. That doesn't actually explain anything. Whereas it just is, it does explain it. It explains that is. It is. It's like when you're born as a baby, is. You know, you're not even up to the point where you're saying it is, right? Because to say it is to differentiate this, that, it, right? A baby isn't up to that point of identification yet, but they're unavoidably at the point of understanding, well, maybe not understanding, but being conscious or aware, is, world, you know, the baby's getting fucking whacked and they're sticking things into it, all the gruesome process of entering into this world, the terrible things that they do at the hospitals anyway. So it doesn't explain anything. Then we have the fallacy of composition, which is attributing characteristics of the parts to the whole. It's like saying what caused causality, of cause and effect, right? Which is a corollary of the law of identity, because everything has its nature and has an identity, and then they act in accordance with their identity, according to the law of cause and effect. This is going to respond predictably, like this. It's going to do this. It's not... Because it has an identity, it has a nature. Sometimes when I flick it, it's not going to turn into a pig and start, you know, spitting in my face. It's not going to burst into flames sometimes. It's not going to, you know, I'm not going to be able to flick it and it's going to fly through the wall. It has a nature, it has an identity, it acts according to causality, in accordance with causality, the law of cause and effect. It doesn't violate the law of nature, nature's laws, universal, well, not principles, laws. So, a fallacy of composition is to attribute individual characteristics to a whole. Remember, we used the football team, the mother and father example, and then consciousness cannot prevent its existence. And so I gave you the fucking sunglasses thing demonstration at the beginning, showing that the facts of reality supersede any God. Even if a God did exist, it supersedes it, and so which in effect proves that it's not God. If you're going to call anything God, which don't, because it's an inaccurate, loaded term, it's reality itself, nature, the laws of everything. That's what's God. But again, you can't call it God, because God means a personality which has preferences, likes and dislikes, hates some things, loves some things, wants to kill a lot of things, right? Or even if you don't believe in those religious Christian versions, just something with preferences that is conscious, that is aware, that can think and plan, that's like us, right? To say nature is like us. Well, no, nature is not like us. We exist in nature. It's very different. Like, ultimately, we depend on nature. Nature doesn't depend on us. Nature doesn't need us to survive. But if nature's just doing its thing and living and existing, well, there's no one that's aware of it. But it doesn't care, because it's not a conscious thing. It's not a mind. Like an AI doesn't care about anything. Your body doesn't care about anything. They're just causal mechanistic machines. You care about things because you're a mind and you're a consciousness. Anyway, I explained that in a lot more detail in the intelligence video. So consciousness cannot prevent its existence. If God had always existed, then it wasn't the cause of its existence. Its existence was unpreventable. There was nothing it could do to stop it. Obviously, then something else is responsible for it. That laws of reality are above it, supersede its authority, because it couldn't prevent its own existence, which is showing that it's not omnipotent, therefore it is not God. Therefore, it's not worthy of your fucking worship. Therefore, just ignore the thing. Just be you and fucking live your life, man. Stop believing in fantasies. You are enough. You are enough. That's the message here. Be sovereign. Don't give your power away to fictions and other evil bastards' fantasies. So that's what I've told you in this one. Maybe I'll make another one and go into some of the psychological elements. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've learned a lot. If you do have rebuttals, arguments against anything I've said, please, I ask you politely, make it logical, make it rational, write it correctly, accurately, with proper grammar. Put commas in the right places, put apostrophes in the right places. Otherwise, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So often I get these comments and it's like, your message is incoherent. I'm not saying you're a bad person. It's just that your writing in that particular moment was bad. I'm not a mind reader. I'm not God. I'm not omniscient. I don't understand unless you lay it out clearly and you have a proper argument. An ad hominem, right, is not an argument. And those ones are also common. Oh, you don't understand. You're stupid. Just, you're this, you're that. That's not an argument. That's attacking my character and is invalid, null and void from the get-go. It doesn't mean anything. We need an argument attacking the points. Or if you have anything else you'd like to add on to strengthen this argument, by all means, go ahead. Yeah, all right, that's done. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.